Emma Bennett stepped out of the Gare du Nord into the crisp, early spring air of Paris. The city buzzed with energy, the distant clang of a tram, the hum of conversation, the aroma of roasting coffee and baking bread. Emma's suitcase bumped along the cobblestones as she navigated the narrow streets of Montmartre, her heart pounding with a mix of excitement and apprehension. She had left London behind for a 3-month art residency, trading the familiar grey drizzle for the promise of Parisian light. Her studio was a tiny attic room with a slanted ceiling, a single window overlooking the rooftops, and just enough space for an easel and a narrow bed. That first night, Emma sat by the window, sketchbook in hand, watching the city lights flicker. She felt both inspired and achingly alone. A week later, Emma wandered down to the Seine, drawn by the city's golden hour. She found herself on Pont Alexandre III, the most ornate bridge she'd ever seen, with its gilded statues and sweeping views of the Eiffel Tower. She sat on a weathered bench and began to sketch the river, capturing the way sunlight danced on the water. Lost in her drawing, she barely noticed a young man sit beside her. He wore a navy pea coat and carried a battered leather notebook. "Excuse me, is this seat taken?" he asked in softly accented English. Emma shook her head, and he smiled. "I'm Julien," he said. "I come here for inspiration." They fell into easy conversation. Julien was a writer, born and raised in Paris, who loved the city's hidden corners and secret stories. He showed her his notebook, filled with poems and snippets of overheard dialogue. Emma shared her sketches, and they laughed at their mutual obsession with capturing fleeting moments. As dusk fell, Julien offered to walk her home. They strolled through winding streets, past glowing cafes and musicians playing under lamplight. At her door, Julien handed her a folded note, "Thank you for sharing your world." "Until next time, Julien." Over the next few weeks, Emma and Julien met almost every evening. They explored Paris together, the bookstalls along the river, the hidden gardens behind iron gates, the tiny bakeries with flaky croissants and bitter chocolate. Julien revealed his secret project. He wrote anonymous letters, poems, encouragements, confessions, and left them around Paris for strangers to find. Sometimes, he tucked them into library books or slipped them into cafe menus. Emma loved the idea and began drawing tiny portraits to accompany his letters. Their friendship deepened. They shared stories of childhood, dreams for the future, and fears they'd never voiced aloud. Emma told Julien about her father's death, her struggle to find her artistic voice, and the loneliness that sometimes crept in at night. Julien confided his doubts about writing, his fear of never being published, and his longing for connection. One evening, as they sat on the bridge, Julien read her a poem he'd written about a lost traveler finding home in a stranger's smile. Emma felt something shift inside her, a flutter of hope, a sense of belonging. Spring arrived in a burst of color, cherry blossoms along the boulevards, sunlight warming the city's stone facades. Emma and Julien spent afternoons sketching and writing in the Jardin du Luxembourg, their laughter echoing among the statues. One night, after a poetry reading in a smoky cellar bar, Julien walked Emma home. The city was quiet, the air thick with anticipation. On her doorstep, Julien hesitated, searching her eyes. "Emma, I think I'm falling in love with you," he whispered. Emma's heart leapt. She reached for his hand. "I think I'm falling in love with you too." They kissed beneath the street lamp, the world narrowing to the warmth of Julien's arms and the soft hush of Paris at midnight. For a few blissful weeks, Emma and Julien lived in a bubble of happiness. They created together, leaving their letters and drawings around the city, on park benches, in metro stations, tucked into bouquets at the flower market. Sometimes, they caught glimpses of strangers reading their notes, smiling, or wiping away tears. But reality soon intruded. Emma's residency was ending. She was expected back in London in a month. Julien received news that a major publisher wanted to meet with him, his big break, but it meant staying in Paris, working long hours on his manuscript. They faced an impossible choice: pursue their dreams apart, or risk everything to be together. They talked late into the night, weighing options, making plans, and then discarding them. Both were afraid of losing each other, of giving up their ambitions, of making the wrong choice. Emma's last week in Paris was bittersweet. She and Julien tried to savor every moment: a sunrise picnic by the Seine, a midnight ride on the Ferris wheel at Place de la Concorde, a final visit to the bridge where they'd met. On her last night, Julien led her to their bench on Pont Alexandre III. He handed her a sealed envelope. "Don't open this until you're home," he said, his voice trembling. They held each other, tears mingling with laughter, promising to write, to visit, to remember. As Emma's taxi pulled away the next morning, she watched Julien grow smaller in the rearview mirror, clutching the envelope to her chest. Back in London, Emma felt adrift. The city seemed grayer, the days longer. She threw herself into her art, painting Parisian scenes from memory: Julien's smile, the curve of the bridge, the way the city glowed at dusk. Her friends noticed her sadness, but Emma kept her heartache private. She checked her phone obsessively, savoring every message from Julien, but the distance felt insurmountable. One rainy evening, as thunder rumbled outside, Emma remembered the envelope. She opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a letter and a plane ticket to Paris. "My dearest Emma," the letter began. "I know you have dreams to chase, and so do I. But I believe our dreams are brighter together. Come back to Paris. Let's write our story, side by side. With all my love, Julien." Emma didn't hesitate. She packed her bags and flew to Paris the next morning. As she stepped onto Pont Alexandre III, her heart raced. Julien was waiting, holding wildflowers and a new letter. They embraced, laughter and tears mingling. Julien whispered, "Let's never let go again." Emma found a tiny studio nearby, and Julien's book was published to acclaim. Together, they continued their tradition, leaving letters and art for strangers. Their story became a legend among Parisians, a love that inspired others to reach out, to hope, to believe in serendipity. Years passed. Emma and Julien faced challenges, creative blocks, homesickness, the pressures of success, but always returned to the bridge where their story began. They traveled together, collecting stories and sketches from cities around the world, but Paris remained their anchor. They married in a small ceremony on the bridge, surrounded by friends, family, and the city they loved. Their tradition of leaving letters and art became a citywide phenomenon, inspiring others to share kindness and beauty. Emma's art flourished, her paintings exhibited in galleries across Europe. Julien published a second novel, dedicated to Emma, "For the one who taught me that love is the greatest story of all." On their 10th anniversary, Emma and Julien returned to Pont Alexandre III. The city was bathed in golden light, the river sparkling below. They sat on their old bench, hands entwined, reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. Julien handed Emma a final letter. Inside was a poem, a promise, and a simple question. "Will you keep writing our story with me, forever?" Emma smiled through happy tears, knowing that their love, like the city, would endure, lighting the way for others. The end.